For a long time now, we have all been aware of what the World Economic Forum is, of the evil they stand for, and just how far they are willing to go in order to put into place what they call the Great Reset. But as the average person has become more and more aware, we've also become more and more angry, and people are starting to push back and have been pushing back for a while now, leading us to what seems to be a breaking point. A point of no return where the WEF and those in control can no longer pull the strings from behind the scenes, but instead they have to try and convince the world of their good intentions, only it isn't going so well at all, and support for the WEF and central banks has dried up at a miraculous rate, meaning that the WEF is now on the brink of collapse as its backers have slithered back away into the holes they came from and humanity has rejoiced. But this saga is not over yet, it is not yet complete, and the collapse of the WEF has only just begun, but in this video I'm going to explain everything I can to you all. Unfortunately though, I put out a video exploring the WEF a few months ago and ended up seeing my channel under attack from the powers that be, so there are some things I simply can't say here. If you want to know everything that's going on, if you want to see the pure unfiltered truth, then sign up to my email newsletter in the link down below, as I will reveal all to my subscribers next week. Now, central banks have always existed under the pretense that they're here to do a good thing, under the idea that they are essential and that without them our financial systems would cease to function. And for a long time, many people, even the vast majority of people, actually believed this idea. But today in 2023, that just isn't the case anymore, as the mask has well and truly begun to slip. But the change didn't start this year or even 1 or 2 years ago, it started back in 2008. You know the story, so I'll be brief. Big housing bubble, 0% interest rates, strippers buying 10 homes to rent out with no income, Michael Burry, Big Short, yada yada yada. The housing bubble pops and prices start to fall. Incredibly over-leveraged banks go bankrupt, and in enters the global financial crisis as contagion is just so ridiculously huge, and the Fed steps in to save the day. And they begin quantitative easing, which is literally just money printing but with some buzzwords chucked on top to try and deceive those who don't know any better. The results aren't exactly stellar, but they're not awful either. The economy takes a long time to rebound, years in fact, as the recession is just so deep and strong that even printing a few $1 trillion isn't enough to get things moving immediately, but eventually things work themselves out. We enter a massive bull market. But inflation doesn't skyrocket. Most of the quantitative easing we saw just went straight into asset prices, and since interest rates were back down at 0%, high asset prices didn't even correlate with high cost to buy those assets because everything was financed by debt, so inflation remained low. But the first step had been taken, and this was truly the beginning of the end for the Fed and other central banks, because this is where 2020 comes into play and the COVID pandemic strikes. Immediately, the world shuts down and the economy is on the brink of its worst collapse in the history of man. But once again, the Fed and other central banks, they step in to come to the rescue, only this time they have to go a whole lot further. They don't just print $1 or $2 trillion, they print 10, and they don't stop for well over 2 years. They flood the economy with so much liquidity, it is literally impossible for asset prices to fall, and the US government itself steps out and basically throws cash from the rooftops as well, all to keep the economy running and spending high. This is where things go really south though, as anyone with even half a brain cell could tell that inflation was on its way, that this money printing couldn't possibly happen without inflation coming after, but the mainstream media and the government and the Fed tell us we're all just paranoid. No inflation will come, everything is well, and there's nothing to worry about, but inflation does start to rise, and relatively quickly, and there are thousands of independent investors and economists warning of what's to come. So the Fed, they go on the offensive. They claim high inflation readings are a rounding error and a monetary blip, and so there's nothing to pay attention to, but 6 months later and CPI readings aren't down, they're up, and by a hell of a lot. So the Fed, they change tact and they use this word transitory to describe inflation, which essentially means it isn't going to stick. The inflation isn't real, and so no action is needed to fight against it. They maintain this ludicrous position for another 6 months before they're finally forced to admit they were wrong and that this inflation is real. But don't worry, they refuse to take any type of blame, instead blaming greedy corporations and evil Putin for forcing prices up, as it obviously had nothing to do with the trillions of dollars they printed out of thin air. So rate hikes start and the economy shudders, as do markets. Stocks fall, not at any ridiculous rate, but certainly downwards, with no positive news left to pick them back up. Before long, it becomes clear what's coming next. The Fed has no choice but to crash the economy and cause a monumental recession to try and fix their own failures when it comes to monetary policy, and this is now so obvious that only the Biden administration themselves even dare to lie to us about the truth. The Fed has disgraced itself and revealed itself to be an enemy of the average person. They didn't print money to save the economy, they did it to save the wealth of the rich by maintaining high asset prices. If it had been about the average person, they would have stopped printing money once the job was done, and they certainly wouldn't have been caught doing insider trading moves making millions off their positions of authority. But they didn't act in our interest at all. If they cared about inflation, the second it flared up, they would have taken their foot off the gas, but it took them an entire year to admit that inflation was even a problem, and even then they only changed tact because that inflation and the risk of it was spooking investors, and that was causing asset prices to fall, so they had no choice. The authority of the Fed has been tarnished beyond repair, and more people than ever are now aware of the scam that is central banks, and this is the first stage in the collapse of the current elite order that we all suffer under. All this information is blindingly obvious to anyone with eyes, but still the mainstream media remain strangely quiet, almost as if they're in fear of what will happen if they dare speak the truth. So why are businesses like the New York Times so intent on maintaining this smoke and mirrors? Why are TV stations refusing to tell their viewers these incredible facts about the true reasons for the mess of our economies are in today? Maybe, just maybe, it has something to do with the fact that these media organizations are bought and paid for by those who caused these problems in the first place, and these figures even have an overwhelming amount of control over YouTube and Google as well. There is an incredibly high likelihood that this video is demonetized, shadow banned, and buried as the powers that be don't want you to see what's going on. The only way to ensure you know the truth is to leave their ecosystems and get your information from platforms immune from censorship. And that's where my 100% free email newsletter Stoic Markets comes in. We send a couple of emails out a week explaining exactly what's going on in the world, exposing the truth behind the corrupt cabal that is destroying our economy. On these emails, I can't be censored, I can't be silenced. You get to hear the truth without any global institution getting in your way. Even in this video here today, I can't expose everything I want to. I have had to censor myself to even publish this video on YouTube, but in exactly 7 days, I'll be sending out an email to this newsletter exposing everything that I can't say here, and you do not want to miss this email. As I said, it's 100% free. You can sign up with just one click down below, and you can always instantly unsubscribe in the future if you want to, so check out Stoic Markets and reveal yourself the truth. And this is where we're led to the other global cabal that is on the brink of collapse, and this is the topic that really threatens to get me banned from YouTube. We are, of course, talking about the WEF, or the World Economic Forum. Now, the WEF has been around for years, decades even, but only over the last 5 years or so have we really known about it. It used to be that every major world leader, every prime minister and president would attend the Davos conference every year. Every billionaire, every massive investor, every CEO of an S&P 500 listed company would turn up too, and they'd push out some interviews, but the vast majority of what they discussed would remain private as they all plotted together. But for the first time in decades, this has started to unwind, and it's thanks to the ordinary person who made their displeasure at this cabal known. Last year, the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak did not turn up to the Davos conference, and neither did the American President Biden. Why? Is it because they oppose the WEF? Is it because they see the evil that goes on behind closed doors? Or sadly not, as they've all turned up many times before, but they don't go anymore because it's just so damn unpopular. It's an instant loss for an election to be seen to rub shoulders with those who want to take away everyone's freedoms, and thankfully we do still live in democracies. The tide has started to change. The average person knows what the WEF is and they don't like it, so our politicians have no choice but to fall back and to avoid the conference altogether. But it does actually go even further than that. DeSantis is on track to compete with Donald Trump for the Republican nomination, and dare I say, even the presidency at the next election. Whether or not he'll win it, sadly I can't say, but if he does, he has already shown his willingness to actively fight against the WEF. In this case, we're not talking about just avoiding them, we're not talking about still accepting their phone calls while no one is watching, like current world leaders are. We're talking about someone who has a decent chance of becoming president of the United States, of the most powerful country in the world, actively opposing the WEF and speaking out against them without any uncertainty whatsoever. It is all unraveling apart for Klaus Schwab, who came oh so close to his desire of worldwide control, but he fell at the final hurdle because he was just so intolerable. No one can help but hate he and everything he stands for. Unfortunately though, this part of the video probably feels a little bit light, and that's because saying too much or the wrong things about the WEF is still a surefire way to find your YouTube channel under attack from the powers that be, so I have had to retract a bunch of information from this video as I just can't post it without being targeted. But I can tell you this information through my email newsletter Stoic Markets, which is 100% free, both in cost to you and free from censorship. It's literally just an email list, so no matter what Google or Meta or any other government tries to do, I can send this information out to you without them stopping me, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in just 7 days. So if you're tired of being lied to, if you're tired of listening to the nonsense the mainstream media peddles, and if you finally want to know the truth about the global elites, about everything to do with our financial world that they spend every waking moment hiding from you, then join Stoic Markets for free with the link down below in the description, or watch this video here if you want to stay on YouTube.